Today's lesson is going to work on the tune Peg Ryan's Polka, also known as Egan's. Today's lesson is also a pretty big departure from the one we did last week, and if you're a little unsure of yourself, it may be a good idea to go back to last week's lesson, make sure you're comfortable with what we did before attempting today's tune. The polka is a dance. By its nature, it's going to be a bit peppier than the tune The Dawning of the Day that we did last week. It is also a little bit more complicated, not because there's a huge variety of notes, but because there's a high-low combination that can be a little tricky on the tin whistle. On the whistle, recall that when we want to make a low note high, so when we play the low D or the high D, the only variation is with how hard we blow. There's no separate fingering to make a low E or a high E. It all comes down to breath control. This tune is really going to train you to be able to use your breath control in a way that is good for tin whistle playing. I'm going to play the tune one time through slowly. We'll talk about it, and then we'll play it 2 more times, each time progressively faster until we get to a more polka rhythm. I'll play the first part twice and the second part twice. As you can see, there's a lot of variation with the way the high F goes down to the low A. What is going to be helpful is, if you remember from last week, we had the articulation of the notes, which I called tonguing, where we took the tongue and basically flicked the top of our teeth in order to articulate that note. You're going to be using this in this tune in order to create the distinction between the high F and the low A, tonguing each note. This is a tune that, for all intents and purposes, you can tongue almost all of the notes, and it won't sound too bad. Polkas, I think by their nature, have a swing to them, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, that lends itself to such articulation as you have with the tongue. The key to this tune is going to be practicing it on your own, slowly at first, making sure you play the F, that high F, clearly, and then making the transition down to the A. What that's going to involve is playing the F itself, and then relaxing your breath and playing that low A, and then pushing the breath a little bit further to make sure you get back up to that high F. So the movement will be it's a high note, then 3 low notes, the high note again. It's going to be a little tricky at first, but it's a good good combination to have mastery of, because so much tin whistle playing relies on being able to go from lower notes to the higher notes. I'm going to play the tune again. I'll play it a little bit faster than the first time I played it, and then the second time I'll try and pick up the tempo a little bit faster. Again, if you don't feel comfortable to play it fast, rewind go back on the video and play it through the first time. Play it until you get comfortable. But be willing to challenge yourself. Don't be afraid to make mistakes or not to be able to keep up. It's only by trial and a lot of errors that you're going to get this. Peg Ryan's once again. things that may be helpful for you to realize is that the tune, as you listen to it, probably sounds very repetitive. That's because it is repetitive. As you look at the structure of the first line, 8 measures, the first measure and the fifth measure are identical. The second measure and the sixth measure are identical. The third measure and the seventh measure are identical. And the fourth and eighth are very, very similar. As I said in class the other night, when you learn one measure in Irish music, you oftentimes get 2 measures out of it. It's more bang for your buck, so to speak. The second part holds true to that as well. The first and fourth measures are very similar, if not identical, and as you go through in the same pattern as before. A lot of Irish music is constructed in this way. It's very repetitive, which is probably why it's pretty much it's a very catchy melody to listen to, and it makes it easier to dance to. Although it's repetitive, that doesn't mean that it's boring. That's part of how we find our ability to express ourselves. Within the structure of the music, we begin to add our own voice into the tradition. We shape and color and contour the music in a way that takes what's received from our teachers, what's received from the music we've listened to in the past, and re-articulates it in a new context. It's in this way of being in dialogue with the tradition, of listening to the masters of the past, flowing forward into the present, meeting within you and your experience as a musician, and how you pass it along to the future, that allows you to claim your voice in the Irish tradition.